we've been getting some massive performances from some very important fantasy football defenses at the best time to get it. We're fighting for playoffs right now, fighting for playoff seeding, and every point matters. And the points, if done correctly, can come a large part from your defense. So I do it every single week, and I'm one of the only fantasy football YouTubers who does defense rankings every single week. And we do it on Tuesdays so you can get your defense on waivers on Wednesday morning. So now we're going through the top 12 defense rankings in fantasy football for week 11. And once I hit 7,500 subscribers, guys, I will be giving away lots of free FFN hats right here, like the one that I have in my hand. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support and have a chance to win one of these FFN hats. So let's go ahead and start diving through these rankings right now. So the number one defense, back at number one, all alone in their own tier again, because they deserve it. It's the Dallas Cowboys. And obviously, they had a great week last week against the New York Giants, right? It's hard to get that good of a matchup 2 weeks in a row. Well, they got it. They're taking on the Carolina Panthers this week. In Carolina, doesn't matter. I don't care if it's in Carolina. I don't care if it's in Dallas. I don't care if it's in Puerto Rico. Dallas is going to crush the Carolina Panthers this week because that's how Dallas wins. Dallas has two ways of playing. They either kick your butt or they falter a lot and they keep it close, or they get their butt kicked. That's been their story this year. They're not getting their butt kicked this week. You can see what they're doing on the screen. It's absolutely outrageous what this defense is able to do. 12 fantasy points per game on a defense. That's as good as wide receiver 2 numbers, running back 2 numbers. This is incredible work. Absolutely incredible work. Dallas Cowboys, physical, mean, gets turnovers, gets touchdowns. Averaging almost a touchdown every other game. That's outrageous as well. So Dallas Cowboys, just a phenomenal defensive play this week. Number 2, I've got the Detroit Lions this week taking on the Chicago Bears. Matchup is there, right? And I get it. They just let nearly 40 points put up on them by the Los Angeles Chargers. They don't exactly they're not exactly a prevent you from scoring type of defense here. That's not what the Lions are. And that's why they're only averaging about 6.7 fantasy points per game. But what they do is they're physical, they get after your quarterback, and they're going to dominate against the Chicago Bears, especially since this matchup is at home. Detroit's on a roll right now. Chicago looks awful. I don't care if Justin Fields plays or not. The Lions are going to be a great defensive play this week. Number 3, the Pittsburgh Steelers here. And at number 4, the Cleveland Browns right here. Pittsburgh taking on the Browns in Cleveland this week. I say it every single week. The reason the Steelers defense can be put in the top 5, the top 10, the top 3 is because they're just so turnover happy. You can basically guarantee at least 1 turnover per game for the Steelers. You can see the numbers on the screen. They're averaging over a forced fumble per game, and they're averaging over a pick per game, and that's exactly how they have played the last several weeks. You can basically ensure an interception, a forced fumble, and also about 3 sacks per game from TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. And the way they played the Cleveland Browns the first time around this season indicates to me that this is going to be another good play from a defensive perspective for the Pittsburgh Steelers in fantasy football, while acknowledging the Browns defense is just as good of a play, and you could honestly rank them above Pittsburgh if you wanted to. That's why they're in the same tier here. I don't have a preference when it comes to the Steelers and when it comes to the Browns. They're both fantastic plays. Cleveland's defense is more stacked top to bottom on every unit of their defense. The defensive line, the linebackers, the pass rushers, the secondary. They've got playmakers all over the field. And you can see why they're averaging almost 11 fantasy points per game. It's outrageous what they're able to do. So Cleveland's defense, to me, just as good of a play, just as physical of a front seven, and just as prone to making turnovers happen. And the Pittsburgh Steelers offense has not had a great year. But the only reason that I have Pittsburgh above Cleveland this week is simply because Pittsburgh does not turn the ball over. They have a very positive turnover differential because they take the ball away from you and they don't turn the ball over. Cleveland doesn't have that same luxury. Cleveland turns the ball over because Deshaun Watson is the sole responsibility for that right there. That's why Pittsburgh's above Cleveland, but both of them are fantastic defensive plays this week. Number 5, good to have them back. The San Francisco 49ers here, taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it's not that Tampa Bay can't play offense. That's really not the reason that San Francisco's in the top 5 defenses this week. Tampa Bay can score points. We've seen it over the past some weeks. Against the Texans, they scored points. Last week against the Titans, they scored points. They can score points. But what they do is they turn the ball over, and San Francisco looked so much better last week defensively. That number on the screen, fantasy points per game, that jumped up significantly just from last week. The weeks prior to that, they were struggling enormously. It's not the same this week. They've got a much better situation. This week versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, more turnover prone, and they average about 1.5 picks per game. San Francisco, they're in a good situation this week. The matchup is not excellent on paper, but Tampa Bay turns the ball over, and they're just a very good defense, and they look fresh and ready to go. The New York Jets here, number 6, and they're taking on the Buffalo Bills. This one is just so funny because it's like you can see the numbers on the screen. The Jets defense is elite, and honestly, those numbers don't even do them justice, to be honest with you. The Jets defense, they're truly elite. Their problem is that the time of possession is so significantly against the New York Jets because their offense can't hang on to the ball. So their defense wears down at the end of the game, and that causes issues. The Jets' saving grace this week is that the Buffalo Bills turn the ball over on a consistent basis. Buffalo Bills stink right now. They stink. And they just fired their offensive coordinator right before I started filming this, Ken Dorsey. Who knows if that's a good or bad thing? Honestly, I don't know. Because who do they have to replace the guy? Is he going to be any better? Buffalo's a mess right now. The Jets defense is not. I like the Jets defense this week at number 6. Jacksonville Jaguars defense at number 7. I know I had them in here last week, and they totally humiliated you if you played them. Trust me, I played them in a league. I got embarrassed this week. It was not a good week, and it was a bad call by me taking on the San Francisco 49ers. I should have known better. This week is different. Against the Tennessee Titans at home in Jacksonville, a team off an embarrassing loss that wants to hold on to their division lead, taking on a struggling Will Levis all of a sudden, throwing interceptions, not looking as efficient. This offense is stalling again. The matchup is here. Jacksonville when you take last week out of the equation, Jacksonville's defense is still averaging over a pick a game and a forced fumble per game. Jacksonville's defense is still very good. Do not use last week as a barometer for this, just like you shouldn't have used the Los Angeles Chargers as a barometer in their matchup versus the Jets when they were taking on the Detroit Lions in week 10. That's not a good idea to go week to week on defenses, and that's why I produce defense rankings every single week, because every single week things change, and things will change for the better for the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Seattle Seahawks here at number 8, and they're taking on the Los Angeles Rams. Now, there's some potential good news here for the Rams. They may very well have Matt Stafford back, and in fact, I read reports it's looking like he's going to be back. That's good for the Rams. They don't want to deal with Brett Rippon. Obviously, they cut Brett Rippon after that embarrassing performance against the Packers, and they signed Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz would be a better option than Brett Rippon, but nonetheless, it'd be better if Stafford was there. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to matter. I really don't. The Rams are in a tailspin right now. They look terrible. And Seattle, coming off a very good win against the Washington Commanders, their defense is going to get back on track because their defensive strength is getting pressure on your quarterback at the rate of 3.3 sacks per game. And the Los Angeles offensive line, I don't care how good Matt Stafford is as a quarterback, whether you think he's good or not good. If you can't get time to throw, it's not going to be good. And he barely gets time to throw. The Seattle Seahawks this week, they're going to be a good play. It sounds weird, but I got the Bills here at 9. And the only reason for it, I'm not going to act like there's any sort of detailed, nuanced analysis on this one, because there's not. It's very simple. They're playing the New York Jets. That's the only reason they're here. Their defense is totally out of sorts right now. There's really not much upside here with the defense, the way they've been playing. And they get after a quarterback, which is a good thing. But Buffalo right now, they're a total mess. The only reason they're here is because the Jets offense is just as much of a mess, if not worse by a lot, than the Buffalo Bills. That's why they're here. No nuanced take on this one. Minnesota Vikings here at number 10. Minnesota's taking on the Denver Broncos this week. Now, I want to acknowledge something here. Denver has been a much improved offense, specifically over the past 4 to 5 weeks. There's no question about that. You look at what they're doing now versus what they did at the beginning of the year and last year, they're so much more drastically improved. The problem is there's a clear ceiling on this offense. Russell Wilson looks so much better. He's efficient right now, and he actually made a vintage Russell Wilson play on Monday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills with that touchdown throw to Cortland Sutton. That was vintage Russell Wilson. But for the most part, throughout the game, Russell Wilson is playing it very safe, and there's just not much upside. Now, Minnesota's strength is they get after your quarterback. They're physical up front. That's their strength. That's Denver's weakness right there. Russell Wilson was under siege versus the Buffalo Bills. That's going to be the ultimate problem here. And like I said, I just don't think there's much of a ceiling here versus the Minnesota Vikings, especially with a Vikings team that has rattled off 4 straight victories without Justin Jefferson, who they might get back this week. And defensively, they've had good games, they've had bad games. I think this is going to be a relatively good game for the Minnesota Vikings. The Cincinnati Bengals on here again, and they're taking on the Baltimore Ravens. So let's be very clear on this one right now. The Cincinnati Bengals, number 1, they've got a good defense. Their defensive coordinator is strong. They get after your quarterback, and they also force turnovers specifically in the secondary. Remember that one. Because Baltimore, as great as they were running for weeks, playing against NFC teams that barely see Lamar Jackson, Lamar Jackson's weakness, this is not disputable, is versus divisional opponents. Why is that? Because Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, they see Lamar Jackson twice a year and they know how to prepare for him and they know his strengths and weaknesses. That's why Lamar Jackson was back to turning the ball over versus the Cleveland Browns. That's why Lamar Jackson turned the ball over versus the Pittsburgh Steelers 7 weeks ago. This is a matchup here. Cincinnati's stronger secondary, Lamar Jackson's turnover-prone capabilities against divisional opponents. That's why Cincinnati's here at number 11. And Washington Commanders rounding out the top 12. Very similar to Buffalo here. The only reason they're on here is because of the Giants. And in fact, the Washington Commanders defense is not good at all. They're not a good defense at all. Matchup here is just simply too great to not exploit. The reality here is there's really 2, maybe 3 matchups. Two, maybe 3 teams that you want to have defense against in fantasy football. The New York Jets, maybe one of those teams. The Carolina Panthers, surely one of those teams. And the New York Giants are absolutely one of those teams. That's the only reason that the Washington Commanders are here at number 12. But if you've got other options, like the ones I just named, don't play the Washington Commanders. There's not much upside there with them. And as I do at the end of every single defense ranking video, I give you my favorite defense for you to pick up in preparation for next week, for week 12. If you've got the roster space and you can afford to have them on your bench for a week, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs defense this week. Now, Kansas City, the reason that I think they're going to be widely available for you when waivers hit on Wednesday or whenever you're watching this video is because they're playing the Eagles in week 11. That's not a good matchup. Nobody wants to play the Chiefs defense versus the Eagles defense. But the people who are paying attention to the Chiefs defense, they're going to want the Chiefs defense. They've been elite this year. Elite defense. And they're taking on next week in week 12, the Las Vegas Raiders. Las Vegas has looked better, but their defense, their offense is still beatable, as you saw on Sunday night when they barely squeaked out a win against the New York Jets. The Chiefs defense is elite. The Las Vegas Raiders defense can be stopped, and the Chiefs defense is going to be widely available coming into this week since they're taking on the Philadelphia Eagles this week. Grab them in preparation for week 12. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for week 11 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for week 11 fantasy football, click on this video right here.